So I want to start off with Jack Welch was the #1 CEO of the 20th century. And at the time that I met him, he had a very big problem. And if he had a big problem, then I had a small problem. Or was it really he had a small problem and I had a big problem? But I'm getting a little ahead of myself on what this talk is. The first thing I'd like to do is talk about some big things in your life. And I'd like you to think back to some big things. Let's say graduation from a university or a graduate school, maybe your first big job, maybe your first big success. And unfortunately, how about your first big failure? Well, this talk is going to cover all of those points with a little twist on the end. But it's actually all about implementing and changing technology and the leadership that's required to make that happen. And it starts in 1996. I was serving my last tour in the United States Navy. And while this glamorous picture might be what you're thinking of your last tour in the United States Navy, in fact, it looked more like this, a building in downtown London. I was graduating from graduate school and leaving my time in the Navy and off to something very exciting. And that very exciting was to join Jack Welch in GE when Six Sigma was just taking off. And for those of you who are too young to remember, Six Sigma was the decentralized finance, the Web 3.0, the everything you can imagine sexy in business at the time. And because it had the 20th century's leading CEO behind it, it made it a very exciting place to be. So I was very excited about doing that. Well, here I was, right? I'm about to leave my graduate school, the Navy. I have a wife, 2 kids. I'm about to move to Silicon Valley. I have graduate school loans, and I bought a brand new Volvo. And you might ask yourself, why the heck would you extend yourself financially to buy a brand new Volvo at a time like that? Well, there's a reason for that. Because growing up, I valued 3 things. And those three things included quality, which was Six Sigma, of course, stability, which was the Volvo, and the positive reinforcement from a father figure. And guess what? Jack Welch was that father figure. So the next thing I know, I'm living in Silicon Valley. And this building wasn't there at the time, but it's the sexiest building in Silicon Valley. And while I was there, couldn't afford a house, and we didn't have a dog, so the Volvo kind of became the family pet. I promise there's a reason for this. And my family is mixed Asian and Anglo, so it's a great place to be. So the Volvo becomes the family pet. Well, then after that, 3 years, 2 states, 4 houses later, I finally landed my first job. If you're following along, we've got graduation and the first job in here together, right? I've got my first big job, and it's running e-business and Six Sigma at a newly acquired business in Tokyo, Japan. My wife's Japanese. It was an absolute home run to go to Japan. And we were very excited to be there until that is the welcoming reception on the 36th floor of the ANA Hotel. If you haven't been to the ANA Hotel in Tokyo, there's a teppanyaki restaurant on the top floor. Teppanyaki is that food where they cook it on the grill. Sometimes in the United States, they're throwing shrimp around and all that kind of thing. Well, the Japanese don't do any of those theatrics, bar one. They put live shrimp on a grill and cover it up with a stainless steel or chrome dish. Heavy thing to watch. Anyway, I get off the elevator, I reach out my hand and I say, "Hi, my name's Chris." I had never met my boss. "My name's Chris, and I'm here to help you run Six Sigma and e-business," right? Think of your new enterprise architecture plan, right? "I'm here to run Six Sigma and e-business for you." And my boss looks at me and he says, "Well, that's unfortunate, because the 2 things I don't care about are Six Sigma and e-business." Now, I don't know about you, but I went from feeling like this enthusiastic young person trying to make a change, just like anyone on this call trying to make a big change in their company. I felt like that enthusiastic person in a foreign country, etc., to feeling like that shrimp on the grill. My enthusiasm had evaporated. So as I was going back to the hotel room to tell my wife, I was trying to figure out how to tell her we really needed to reconsider this job. But I got back and she was so excited to be there. She'd gone to college in Tokyo. There she was back as an expat. I said, "Well, we're going to have to make it work. That's all there is to it. We're going to make this happen." But that entered another big question. So now we got the family pet the Volvo, is back in the United States with no place to store it. And we have to make a decision. Sell the car, which remember to me represented stability, sell the car or bring it to Tokyo at a ridiculous expense. So I'll ask you just right now, would you sell your family dog? Probably not, right? I know it sounds a little unreasonable, but we spent an enormous amount of money that we didn't have and shipped that Volvo to Tokyo. So during the days, sort of my thankless job with my boss who didn't care, I worked on Six Sigma and e-business. I knew Jack cared, but my boss didn't really care. And on the weekends, we drove around Japan and we saw all these fantastic places in Japan, and nothing like having a tour guide in your house who speaks the native language. So that became a very exciting period for us. Then about 12 months later, Jack Welch, the 20th century's biggest CEO, decides he's going to hold court in Tokyo on all the GE businesses. And when I say hold court, that's a pretty accurate description of what it looked like. What Jack would do is sit us all down at a big table and you'd go in and present. So my boss looks at me begrudgingly and he says, well, Chris, you got 2 slides and 5 minutes. Now you think about this. You just rolled out your new enterprise architecture plan. You just rolled out your new DeFi application. You just figured out what to do with blockchain and you get 2 minutes or 2 slides and 5 minutes to do it. I don't know about you, but that was a lot of pressure. So I worked like a dog on these 2 minutes, 2 slides and 5 minutes. And then when the day finally came, there Jack was in the center of this conference table. This is actually the conference table at the top of the A&A Hotel. Jack sat in the center of the table and he goes through the slides. They've given him a paper printout of everything and he's writing notes and things going through. And the time finally comes and he looks up to me and he says, okay, Chris, what do you got? Now, I don't know about you, I was a little intimidated, and what it really looked like was this, a tunnel, and at the end of it was Jack's face. So I had 5 minutes to do the best I could possibly do, presenting something my direct boss didn't care about. 5 minutes. I got all the way through it, and then when I got to the end, Jack asked me 2 very hard, I don't know how he did this, but he would ask everybody 2 really hard questions about whatever you were talking about. And if you answered them, you felt great. If you didn't, you felt like a dog. Well, I made it through. I answered the 2 questions. And then, most importantly, Jack was famous. Let me bring in a little visual prop. Jack was famous for this. He would carry these Sharpie pens with him. And as soon as the tip got dull, he'd pitch them away. And he writes on the top of the page, best page in the deck, Jack. I don't know about you, but I wanted to crawl across the table and grab that page and take it home like some kind of trophy. But I was smart enough not to end my career in a conference room in Tokyo. But that's when I realized what Jack's issue was. So I stood up from the meeting. When the meeting was over, we all stood up and we went filing out of the room. And I had to file like whisper close to my direct boss because the room was so crowded. And when I expected him to say something, not only did he not say, good job, attaboy or whatever, he wouldn't even make eye contact. There I had supported my little piece of the business for him. He wouldn't even make eye contact. I don't know if any of you who've ever done something that you've worked really hard on or presented something to your boss and that's what ends up happening. Well, that's what happened. Fortunately, I knew Jack was excited and so was his head of HR, but not my direct boss. So I thought, when I left that room, I will never let this happen to somebody else again. And that's when I realized what Jack's problem was. Jack had this grand vision. Everyone knew about it and most people did it, but he had some leaders in the company who just didn't get it, which meant those parts of the business were never going to accelerate as fast as they could have because he was struggling with those people. Well, I left GE several years after that, not because of this meeting, but when Jack left, there was a certain amount of the heart of the company that went with him. And today, things are different. At least some things are different. So one of the things that's different today is what used to be globalization was the #1 thing in the world. It's turned into the end of the Indiana Jones movie with boxes and things all over the place. And it used to just be the mythical thing. Now it's the real seaports of every world. So the supply chains are a mess, globalization struggling. But maybe more important is what's happened to the workforce. And what's happened to the workforce is a shift in generations, a shift in expectations we are all aware of, right? We know baby boomer, Gen X, millennial, and Gen Z. You may not be able to name those years exactly, but you probably know which one you are. And you probably also know that millennials have this reputation of demanding stuff. I would argue that what millennials really do is they ask for things that my generation didn't feel comfortable with and couldn't get away with. Maybe sometimes they take it too far, but they ask for things they really want. And guess what happens when they don't get it? They leave. So we have a big problem. So another thing that is different today is my most successful project in Tokyo was an electronic document approval process that would flow through this business and nobody had to touch it. Instead of those, believe it or not, those ink stamps that the Japanese use to approve transactions, they're called hankos. That went away and it went electronic. Well, that's nothing compared to what intelligent automation can do, built on an enterprise architecture that supports intelligent automation and AI and machine learning, et cetera, right? So the amount of advancement in automation is through the charts. And it scares the hell out of some people, because just like this picture on the screen, a lot of people are worried, if they're not told otherwise, that they might be the subject of that automation. One other thing that's changed, Jack retired, his successor struggled for many, many years, and now Larry Culp's taken over GE, and guess what he's focused on? Business transformation, profitability, doing it right all over again. So the good news has returned to GE, but some things are still the same. And some of those things that are the same are sometimes not so good. So according to McKinsey, of all the business transformations that are embarked upon by we business people everywhere, 70% of them fail outright, and some percentage of those just don't quite make their goals. But think about that. We are doing business transformations faster than we've ever done them before, and 70% of them are failing, which means we are destroying value faster than we've ever destroyed value in some companies. Another thing that unfortunately hasn't changed is there are still millions of young, motivated people, some of whom are on this call and some of whom are back in your organization, who are living lives, as Henry David Thoreau would say, lives of quiet desperation, dying to make an impact and have a great, meaningful, and exciting career. So a lot of them quit during the COVID period. They're still out there dying to do great things. And why are they out there? What is it that's driving that? That boss I had, there's still plenty of those people around who just don't understand how to open that can of excitement and enthusiasm of the people who work on their teams to embrace enterprise architecture, intelligent automation, any of the things that are blockchain that are going to drive the business forward. They're still out there. So what does all of that mean? What is the implication, the big implication? Well, I would say the big implication is more obvious about what it's not than what it is. And what it means is if we don't do something about it, we're going to end up with offices that look like this. So what's the solution? I think the solution starts with helping humans be heroes in the age of automation. Helping humans be heroes in the age of automation. Well, in the age of Marvel comics, etc., and this is actually DC Comics, what do I mean by a hero? Is this what I mean by a hero, flying through the sky with a cape and magic powers and X-ray vision? No, but it's a great picture. What I mean by being a hero is this: a person who realizes more of their potential than the average person and achieves some inspirational goal, inspirational to them, inspirational to other people maybe also, including conquering their lesser selves, the person they were before. Well, let's take a little journey down the hero steps and let me explain why I think this is so important and why I've seen it be so important with people. Joseph Campbell, the man on the left, when he died, was one of the leading authorities on mythology in the world. He had studied mythology. The reason the picture on the right-hand side was his most famous book, A Hero of a Thousand Faces. And what he found was we human beings produce these myths, and we produced them around the world before there was any internet to connect with who was making the same myths up. And the myths all had this consistent pattern. And that consistent pattern he called the hero's journey. And you may say, well, okay, the hero's journey, what in the world is he talking about? Well, the hero's journey, you're going to know it viscerally from The Hobbit, The Bourne Identity, the Matrix movie, the Harry Potter movies, and the list could go on and on. Because the hero's journey is such a compelling way to describe the way life really is, the way people experience it. You might be saying, oh, those are only movies. It's to describe the way you wish life was. Well, let's look at some real heroes. Here's a page of real heroes who've in fact all taken their own version of a hero's journey. Most of these you may know. Hopefully everybody, but maybe you might see Amelia Earhart on the top right corner. You might be able to recognize her. Every one of these people had to take that hero's journey, which I'm going to explain in just a minute. You might go, who's the astronaut? Well, I'll tell you, that's the only hero on this page that I know. Her name is Sunita Williams. She is the only astronaut from the Naval Academy class that I graduated from. And she has spent more time on the International Space Station than I ever spent on an aircraft carrier. And as an Indian woman in the United States in a male-dominated world filled with a bunch of technologists, she had quite a few things to overcome, and she's very happy to have overcome them. So the hero's journey is real, and it's for all of us. So maybe it would be good to at least show you what the hero's journey is, and you can go back and look at this later. I'm going to cover only a few pieces, so don't worry about too many of the things here. So the hero's journey is a typical repeating pattern, and that repeating pattern, it turns out, is exactly how we live our lives if we choose to. So let me simplify. These are all important points, but let me simplify these. Top of the hero's journey is the known world, the world you are today, the job you've ever done before, the company you've ever been in, the responsibilities you've ever been. That is the known world. The unknown world is where you stretch and go beyond that. And so it breaks down, the hero's journey breaks down into three main phases. The first one is separation. Well, what is separation? That's when you suddenly realize you can do something that transcends what you've done before. You can stand up in your first team meeting. You can manage your first department of people. You can do your first merger and acquisition. You can gut your whole IT system in the business and build a fantastic enterprise architecture that's going to make your business go 100 years into the future. That's a pretty big separation. What's it look like in the movies? The red pill. It's when Neo decides, I'll take the red pill and the world will never be the same. It's when Harry Potter finds out that he's a magician. Oh my God, the world will never be the same. And it's when Luke Skywalker comes back and realizes his ranch with his uncle and aunt has been burned to the ground. That is separation. Now the question is, what comes next? The next stage is initiation. That's where you start to learn the new ways of what's going on. You learn the new technology, the new tools, the new capabilities, the new markets. That's where you're expanding yourself beyond where you've been before. What does it look like? It looks like this. Luke gets the lightsaber and for the first time says, this force thing is kind of cool. And just to reinforce the point of how constant these messages are, it's when Harry Potter gets a wand and realizes he can do some amazing things. But more realistically, it's where that young person in your company finally realizes they can take over a meeting, thank God face-to-face with COVID passing away, they can sit down and take over a meeting. Maybe I'm talking about the young woman in this picture. Maybe I'm talking about the African man on the right. Who knows who I'm talking about? The fact is, young person steps up and takes a new role in a new organization. But before it all sounds so exciting in this initiation piece, what Joseph Campbell taught us was there's a price to pay, and it's called facing the dragon. Each and every one of us must face the dragon. And what is the dragon? Well, in the myths, it's the biggest, baddest, fire-breathing thing out there, right? It's terrifying. It's Darth Vader. It's whatever, right? It's the Matrix trying to kill you or stick you back into a tube. But what Joseph Campbell taught us all was the dragon is our fear. It's the fear of doing that next most difficult, complicated thing. It's the fear of presenting your new enterprise architecture plan to the boss and having him reject it. And if you're going to complete the hero's journey, you have to overcome the dragon. And the dragon is your fear projected outside of you. And that takes us to the return. So the return is when you've now accomplished this amazing thing. Again, it could be minor, it could be major, depends on who the person is and what their stage of life is. And what does it look like? It looks like this. Maybe they hang medals around your chest. Maybe they send you on a word trip. Maybe they just pat you on the back and say, hey, good job. Maybe my boss could have said, hey, nice job with that presentation to Jack. Whatever it is, it looks like the return. So now I'd like to take you forward to a different world. And that world is Stockholm, Sweden in 2017. I've now moved, I've become the intelligent automation leader for Accenture and then Deloitte in Northern Europe. I'm in Stockholm and a financial services business there is struggling mightily. What do I mean by struggling? Well, the financial numbers are going all the wrong directions. So what does that look like inside the business? Well, I'll give you two different perspectives. One perspective was the CEO, Gustav. And what he faced was what Niccolo Machiavelli would describe is the power of the courtiers. All the senior people who report to the CEO of a company, who all have their own agendas. They want to look like they're cooperating. Some of them do. Some of them are all competitive with each other. It can be a very difficult thing to make change take place. And those of us who are not running big companies should have a lot of humility understanding what Gustav, the CEO, was going through. So Gustav's a senior guy. The junior guy is Jens. Jens is in charge of operations. And what Jens is dealing with is looking at an incredibly complicated process of what's going on in the business. It takes me back to the enterprise architecture map earlier this morning. And you say, tell me we have more than a whiteboard or a chalkboard describing how our systems are running, right? Well, there's Jens. He knows he's got to deliver. He's got to deliver results for the company or there's going to be a big problem. And so the way Jens told me the story, buildings in Stockholm are not particularly tall, but nonetheless, he ends up on an elevator on the way up in the morning with Gustav, Jens and Gustav in this building. And if you haven't met too many Swedes, they can be very friendly people, and he was very friendly. Gustav says, "Good morgen." That's my best Swedish. "Good morgen" to Jens. And when they stepped off that elevator, what happened was Jens was able to communicate to Gustav that he thought he had an idea, that he could implement some things that would really help. And Gustav saw a potential hero. But as Gustav and Jens parted, Gustav said to Jens, "I'll give you 30 days to come back to me with a compelling plan. If you don't, we're going to have to take drastic actions." So whatever country you're from right now listening to this, we all know what drastic actions sounds like and what it looks like. And it's kind of scary. So there we are in Stockholm, Sweden. I happen to be in Stockholm right about the same time. Not a place I've spent that many years in my life. And that is where I got to meet Jens. So Jens and I sat down and he said, "Well, what do I do? I got some ideas." Well, I knew a great deal about intelligent automation and the tools that make up intelligent automation and how they can add value and accelerate a business. And I knew how to plug some of those tools in the right way. Although I'm learning a lot about enterprise architecture and how they can be plugged in even better. But I came in with that knowledge base. Jens came in with a knowledge base of understanding what his business was. He knew there were complexities, but he understood what the business was, and he understood there were opportunities within the business. So we spent that 30 days working together to create a plan that he could then go back to Gustav and present. I guess that's what Gustav wanted to see. So give it 30 days forward, he sits down with the boss, Jens goes into Gustav and says, "Here's the plan. What do you think?" And he, of course, here's not the final plan, here's my big draft plan. "What do you think, boss?" Well, Gustav was delighted. He was delighted because the plan that Jens was able to show him spoke to all the key stakeholders in the business required to make this plan go forward. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But what everybody wants to know is, when Gustav gave him the green light and he went off to the races to implement this intelligent automation solution in the business, what happened and how long did it take? The answer to how long it took was several months. The answer to what he got out of it was that he got more innovation. That means they were able to do products and services differently than they were ever able to do them before. That's what innovation is all about. And every innovation leads to what a customer can either find valuable or not valuable. The more valuable innovations you get, the business takes off. The other thing they got was more motivation. Now you got all these people in the company saying, "My God, we can do these incredible things." So that's what they did. They launched new things and started bringing in new revenue, made more money from the things they were actually doing, delighted customers, gave them better services, which of course led to more profit. And you say, well, how much more profit? Was that like 5 Swedish krona profit, which you can't buy a cup of coffee for? No, they actually got a 300% ROI on the investment in the project. Now, you do projects like that over and over and over again, you're going to make a pretty huge ROI. And you're going to accomplish a digital transformation in the business using those tools. But the most important thing that they got out of the whole project, which accelerates more projects, was a shared purpose. Now you got these people in the company who are all pointing towards something they see can be achieved and that will deliver specific results for the company. So I thought it would be a good idea to describe how did they basically do that. That's a good question. The first question is a point of inspired and informed leadership. I don't want to leave that as an abstract. So I want to go to Marcus Aurelius and say, here's a guy who taught us this 2,000 years ago. We can relearn that. This is what they did in the business in Stockholm. They thought holistically. What does that mean? It means across the business, up and down and side to side, not just what's going on in my silo. Ask yourself how many times you've seen that go wrong. They acted with the knowledge of technology. So I helped them understand what these technology tools could do. And once people know what tools can do, they can figure out how to apply them in a really good and effective way. That's exactly what they did. Gustav had to send consistent messages. Have any of you been in an organization where the CEO or the boss says a message, then a couple weeks later he sends another message that's not so clear and committed? It's a little fuzzy what he really means. Well, you know what happens? The naysayers pull their knives out and they kill the project because they can tell the messaging wasn't consistent. Gustav understood that and stuck to it. Jack Welch used to say he knew he'd said the message enough when someone could repeat it back to him before he walked up and started talking. That, and only then, believe me, he was sick of saying it by that point. Engaged employees, I'm going to spend more time on this too. The number one, most important of anything. The technology is exciting and it's cool, but it's nothing compared to the engaged employees. We all know that, right? We are employees. You know what it's like to be engaged. And the last piece was reflected glory. This is straight out of Marcus Aurelius. Gustav understood that when the team succeeded, he looked great. It wasn't about, Gustav banging his chest and look like a hero. The team looks great, therefore Gustav looks great. That's a powerful combination. Next one is understanding the technology. The team needs to understand what the technology is because they can't build something that if they don't know what the tools are, right? Well, let me give you an example. Go build a house. And this might be the first thing you think of because you don't know what the tools you have at your disposal. So you just sketch out, oh, okay, there's my house. I'll just draw this house because that's the best I can do. But what if I taught you instead all the individual tools that you had at your disposal and then let your creativity flow? Well, just maybe you might come up with a house that looked like this. This is Falling Water, Frank Lloyd Wright's masterpiece. So they understood the technology. Again, let's be less abstract. What technology am I talking about? Here are some of the tools they had to understand and get a basic grasp of to be able to solve their business problems. Robotic process automation, natural language processing, that's intake and output, right? You can project the natural language. Chatbots, digital virtual assistants, machine learning and AI, and then to say, how do I keep an eye to the future to be able to expand and go beyond this? Well, those things, that combination of tools, it was enough for them to craft and create a fantastic value proposition for the company. A third point is to focus on value creation, not this. You don't focus on Meta, the coolest new thing in the world, unless, by the way, Meta has a clear, concrete solution for you. If you can figure out what to do with a non-fungible token and use Meta to do it and sell it in the virtual world, rock on. But in this case, this business didn't need to think about that. So don't get too enchanted by the shiny new ball. Get enchanted by the tools that can actually deliver. And what do they deliver? They deliver value. Every one of these gold coins represents a happy customer, an employed employee, someone with a promotion opportunity, and a community that's better off. The fourth point was about empowered and excited teams. This is a much more complicated subject than one slide and this amount of time can handle. But let's say, what is employee engagement? There are 7 major factors to employee engagement that consistently drive employee engagement upward to the point that you get more out of the people and they bring more of themselves to the table. But it really boils down to, if I had to say it simply, help people genuinely feel important. And there are ways to do that. help people. First of all, you have to actually think they're genuinely important. And then there are ways to make them do that. And there are these magic 7. So for example, availability of constructive feedback is a huge piece, but more to that subject. The 5th piece is to help humans be heroes. And this is why I talked about what does it mean? What's the hero's journey? Well, because every human being in every organization at any given time is standing at a road, not a crossroad in this case, a choice, a journey where they can go any direction. Maybe those 3 directions you can think about in the world of technology as my job is going to go away, my job is going to stay the same, or my job is going to be different, right? Those 3 general paths to every transformation. But every one of those 3 things can be a hero's journey if the person understands and takes it as that and wants it to be that. Some people want to go do something new. Some people want to do exactly the same thing, and some people are dying for something new. What does that look like in the world of technology? One of my favorite examples, you can imagine, is here. Here are 3 young, motivated people who want to go make stuff happen in the business. And they're being as human as they can be. They are bluffing and blasting and running and going through the Death Star, trying to save the world, right? And what happens? Despite all that incredible humanity and wonderful energy behind them, they still end up in a trash can. So there they are in the trash can. The princess starts barking orders. The Wookiee who's in the background starts shooting and the bullets are flying all over the place. And the millennial Luke goes swimming. It's almost funny the way that's said. And the older guy in the middle doesn't know what to do with himself. That's what can happen when humans get in a position that they can't get themselves out of. But what happens in the movie is the same thing that can happen in real life. They reach out to a robot, and that robot, built on a solid enterprise architecture foundation, can go out and do what human beings couldn't do. In this case, shut down all the trash compactors on the Death Star so they can get out, which is exactly what they do. So this one change, this thinking about helping humans be heroes, it applies to the pirates, the princesses, the Wookiees, and the millennials. And the millennials are the core of your business. The 6th piece is an operating model built for purpose. That doesn't sound like a consulting slide. I don't know what does. This is what I mean by that. This is a project I was intimately involved with. You get to the end of the project and you go, hey, and this is the new process, right? Well, if you stopped here, you got a big problem because nobody's going to know what to do. Let me give you an example in real life. Winchester Mystery House was built by Sarah Winchester, the heiress to the Winchester rifle money. That's what her great-grandfather had done. Well, a mystic, like an unethical consultant, a mystic convinced her to keep building. And build she did. She built 161 rooms, 47 fireplaces, 10,000 panes of glass, and it was all inspired by a mystic, not a purpose, not an operating model for what is someone actually going to do with this house. Well, if your business does this, it won't be a curious tourist attraction in San Jose, California. Your business will go away. The alternative model is Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water in Pennsylvania. Frank Lloyd Wright took more than 2 years before he even put pencil to paper to design this for the Kaufman family, Mr. and Mrs. Kaufman, vacation home in the woods in Pennsylvania. But after 2.5 years, I think it was 2.5 years exactly, he finally got the call of Mr. Kaufman to come see the plans, and he drew it out. And what he did is he drew a building that had an operating model that suited the people who owned it. Because, Frank Lloyd Wright said, I never design a building before I've seen the site and met the people who will be using it. That's true in enterprise architecture and the business. How do you build the business for the people who will live in it? And one of my favorite examples of this, if you really want to know, do you really pay attention, is the staircase. Everybody's seen this staircase on the bottom. You go, oh, that's really neat. That's a nice staircase on the bottom. Yeah, it's not just a nice staircase on the bottom. It's there because Mrs. Kaufman liked to skinny dip. And Frank Lloyd Wright got that information out of talking to them, and he said, and skinny dip you will. Those stairs go straight down into a beautiful pool of water that Mrs. Kaufman used to use. The last piece is aligned incentives and culture. I can make this really simple. Charlie Munger said it best. Show me the incentive, and I will show you the behavior. Companies that have an incentive structure that rewards people to go this way, and then they tell them to go this way, guess what you get, right? It doesn't work. So systematically looking through the incentive structure to incent the behavior you actually want, which is what Gustav, his HR team, and Jens were all involved in doing. Those 7 things roll into 7 steps that I call the Noble Automation Now method. Why? Because they work. I use these same pieces multiple times, and it became clearly a path that people can be more successful implementing technology built on enterprise architecture with intelligent automation. So you may say, it's a lot of steps. Do I need to do all the steps? Well, let me just give you a picture. Which of these sets of steps would you choose? The steps on the left are made out of granite, and they're beautiful, right? Absolutely beautiful. Steps on the right are just kind of construction wood. The big difference is the steps on the right actually go to the first floor. The steps on the left haven't been finished yet. So my point is, try to touch on all of these steps, at least in some way, to build a robust step to the next floor. So the next question you may say is, what is this noble thing? What's noble automation? Well, noble automation in this case have taken from noblesse oblige. Noblesse oblige is an expression. If you're European, you probably have said this many times in your life. If you're not, what it means is the obligation of the leaders to treat the people underneath them in a noble way for the betterment of the entire community. So it's the responsibility of the privileged people to act with generosity and nobility toward those less privileged. Are we talking about charity here? No. We're talking about how do you make your kingdom, your company, your organization thrive. You do it by thinking about all of the stakeholders. That doesn't mean some people won't leave the company with technology and go off on their own hero's journey, but you don't ignore those people and expect things to work well. What does it mean? What does noble automation look like? It's intelligent automation with inspired leadership that maximizes the outcome for all stakeholders. So roll forward to the end of this story, and I'm not leaving a lot of time for Q&A. If someone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them at the end. But I want to take you forward. The last time I saw Jens, he was on a stage with a multinational audience talking about what the impact was of this project he had done that served all the stakeholders in his organization. I don't know how many Swedes you know, but Swedes don't exactly jump up and not as excited and animated as the average maybe American might be. He was excited and animated because of what he and Gustav and the whole team had achieved. They had made a major transformation in the business built on these principles. So there he was, and I'm watching him be incredibly excited. And I thought to myself, after he got all kinds of applause, what do you do to do more of this? So he offered me a ride back to the hotel in Stockholm. And he offered me that ride back to the hotel in a car that he had financed by his bonus. And the question I thought in the car was, how do we bring more transformations to look like this instead of that McKinsey study? And I think the answer is that if you help humans be heroes and you see the heroism in yourself and the people around you, and you can develop something that serves the maximum number of stakeholders, creativity, productivity, and enthusiasm come out in buckets. And it can be done. I've been there. I'm sure you've been there in various projects of your life. It didn't happen on the 36th floor of the A&A Hotel in Tokyo for me, but it happened in Stockholm, Sweden. So as he drove away in the bonus financed car, all I could think of is, how could more people do this? And my 3-word answer is, and it's become really my personal quest, is 3 simple words: noble, automation, now. Look, I'd like to thank you very much for listening to that presentation. I hope it resonated with you, and it's exciting. If we have any questions, I can answer. Let's see if I can get over to the questions section. Will recordings be available? Yes, they will be. That's an easy question to answer. I can handle that one. That's the end of the presentation. If you'd like to find out more, of course, about this topic, guess where you can find out more. I'm very happy to be integrated with enterprise automation, enterprise architecture, to put automation enterprise architecture together. It is such an important subject to be successful in the way businesses are going. That's it. If we don't have any other questions, I'd like you all to join me for just a moment. We have another couple of exciting sessions coming up right in this morning. So the next session after this is going to be, whoops, let me stop my screen sharing. Okay, the next session after this is going to be Dan Hebda from Mega, and the title is Using Composability to Drive Flexibility, Speed, and Resilience. Another topic that totally resonates with the two topics you've heard today. So I will give Proqis and our sponsors a great deal of credit for combining the topics in the right order. We will see you all at the top of the hour. For me, that's going to be 9 a.m. in Denver, Colorado. So wherever you are at the top of the hour for Dan Hebda, using composability to drive flexibility, speed, and resilience from Mega. Take care. Thank you very much.